So here's a wee video about the election basically. I'm going to make an alternative suggestion to engaging in the electoral process. What we could do, if we really wanted to, is stop engaging in the system. I mean, there's enough of us here that if we were all to down tools tomorrow, things would grind to a halt. So that's an alternative. And what we have to bear in mind when we're considering that as an alternative is that oppression can only take place with the will of the oppressed in some way. And the system can only function with our acceptance and willingness to go along with it. But the reality is, none of us ever gave our consent to live in a world that we live in. None of us ever gave the consent when we were being born that we were okay with the fact that we were being born as living, breathing, sentient beings that required a variety of variables to exist and a certain environment to grow. We never agreed to the fact that, yeah, okay, we're pretty cool with the fact that we're going to have to pay to eat. We never agreed to the fact that, hey, we're okay with the fact that we need to pay to have a roof over our head. And we also definitely never agreed to the fact that we needed to work 40 hours a week to just even barely subsist, minimally, if we're lucky. Very few of us are actually lucky. And nor did we actually agree to the fact that we would allow massive multinational corporations to poison and pollute the environment, at the same time while rendering the majority of habitats uninhabitable and killing and raping and murdering non-humans, women and children in vast swathes of numbers. So none of us agreed to this. Or, sorry, maybe you did agree to that, but I'm assuming that we didn't agree to it. So for this to actually continue to exist, we have to give it our consent. Every day when we enact in this system, we're giving it our consent. And if we withdraw that consent, if we even actually begin to understand the concept of what consent is, and the right to say no, and the right to say, I don't want to be fucking part of this. If we can learn to understand that, then the actual notion of engaging in an electoral process becomes completely redundant. Now, I'm not saying that you can't make a difference by voting. Voting at a local level in council elections, you can make a difference. You can get involved in your community council. You can get involved in organising events locally. You can try and set up surgeries for racism and patriarchy and sexism. That's an idea that I'm trying to implement in the local community. The people that I did go to it that I thought might be open-minded about it obviously were very nervous. But you can try these things, and we can try a different variety of ways, and that's engaging in the process, and that's engaging in creating the types of communities that you want to create. Sadly, getting involved in the general election doesn't really get involved in creating the type of human communities that we need to grow and live. All it does is reinforce the power of Westminster. All it does is reinforce the narrative of the neoliberal ideal, the commoditization of an exploitability of every resource, whether that be human, non-human, regardless. So, as an alternative to the election, maybe, this election that's been announced just out of the blue for, well, no apparent reason, and we're getting told, I actually saw somebody comment that get prepared to vote tactically, because this is how we're actually going to claw back a little bit of our voice in something that wait a minute, wasn't that what the whole Brexit vote was about? Wasn't that about us regaining our voice and taking it back from the EU? And wasn't that about us as a nation taking it back? No, obviously it wasn't. It was about just sort of instilling some sort of weird nationalism to just benefit the minority, as always. And, you know, we can actually, you know, if you actually analyse our elections critically, you can trace correlations right through our elections. Well, you can trace them all the way back, but more specifically, I'm talking to like about 2014, the Israeli election, and the elements of fear that were operated in the Israeli election were then adopted by the Tories, and then they to some device they were used within, you know, the Scottish referendum vote and the Brexit vote, Donald Trump's presidency, and now what's about to happen again. And it's, you know, this is going to be about progressive, the voice of the people versus the voice of the corporate power. Honestly, regain a little bit of control in your life. And you know, it's not easy. You know, we are completely dependent upon the dominant culture to survive for the majority of time. You know, some people are able to exist to the best of their ability outside of that, but for the majority of us here, I know in the United Kingdom, Britain, the British Isles, Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales, that's almost physically impossible. So we need to start building healthy human communities. And we need to start disengaging ourselves from the process and saying we don't want to be part of this system. Actually, you know, we don't want to be involved in this electoral process where, like, apparently, okay, this has been quicker than 4 years, but every 4 years we get an attempt to say about the world we want to live in. Well, actually, at the same time, also constantly talking about the type of world that we want to live in, created on social media, and criticising political figures and criticising doctrines and what they're doing. But we're not criticising. We're just poking fun, and we're allowed in the system just to continue the way it wants to continue. So I would suggest thinking about what is happening here in this election, and thinking about what you're asked to be, thinking really about what you're being asked to participate in.